Here we are in the museum gardens in the heart of the beautiful historic city of York. But I want to find out where it all began. Today we've got 200,000 people in the city, but where did human settlement start in the city and when? No better place to look than the stone here. Just lies here in front as you come into the museum gardens. Usually someone's sitting on it eating their sandwiches, squirrels playing on it, pigeons pooing on it. This is a really good example of the oldest things we can find here in York. I'm talking about the carving here. This is what we call a cup and ring pattern. You can see these concentric circles here and this line, this linear element that comes in. What does it mean? There's a lot of theories, but to be honest, your guess is as good as mine. Some people say maybe a map. Maybe it told us about the land here, what the land was being used for. There's even a theory that perhaps these circles and this line were carved into the land here. But we just don't know. The reason being that when you go so far back, it's so hard to know. There's so little evidence. This, we feel, would have stood upwards, like at Stonehenge, and there would have been a few of them that have been found around the local area here. How old is it? Well, there lies the million-dollar question. We think somewhere between maybe 3,000 and 20,000 years old. But it's very hard to date, and the reason it's hard to date is because when you go back so far, it's very difficult, and also, although we can date the stone, it's harder to date the carving here. And although I say maybe up to 20,000 years old, but in subsequent years the pattern could have been copied, so it could be more recent. So stones such as this tell us that yes, people have been in York for thousands of years, although initially wouldn't have been in any way civilised. People would have initially hunted the deer here, the boar. We found flint tools, scrapers, essentially telling us that in Neolithic times there was a presence here in York. Following that, people would have learned to farm the land, although they would have had some difficulty. The ground here was very poorly drained and there was a very heavy clay soil here, so it wouldn't have been easy for them. What came next were a Celtic tribe arriving in York around 200 to 300 BC. 200 to 300 BC, at least that's our best guess. It was very difficult as you go further back because there's very little archaeological evidence about the Brigantes and even less written. In fact, the only written evidence we have about the Brigantes tribe comes from within the Roman period when they were documenting it. We've got no idea what they looked like because they never carved pictures of faces or anything, and no idea what they wore. So what do we know? We know that they were around most of the northeast of England, Durham, Yorkshire, Northumberland. The word Brigantes itself, we think, comes from the word meaning high up or elevated. Whether this means they were referring to themselves as important people or simply on high ground, we don't know. AD 71, when the Romans came up, you'd expect, covering such a wide expanse of land, the Brigantes to put up a good fight. But didn't seem so. And there's a few reasons why we think that was probably the case. Sparsely populated, they set up lots of little hill crofts, but there was very few hill forts or defences that were significant. Secondly, the lifespan of your average Brigantian, you're talking about 30 to 40 years life expectancy, and that's if they survive childbirth. The Romans had a good 10 years on them, to be honest. But finally, the Brigantes as a tribe, well, it was more like a series of tribes. Under their king, Venutius, the series of tribes, rather than unifying under a common banner, seemed to remain disparate. There was a lot of squabbling and fighting between them, and it meant, as Roman historian Tacitus put it, that although they fought individually and so were conquered universally. Would have been very little problem for the Romans coming up 5,000 soldiers. They would have had very little problem in terms of dealing with the brigantes. So AD 71, when the Romans marched up to York. When they came here, aside from the tribes, there was very little about meadowland, but mostly just trees, like the yew tree here. In fact, they gave the first name to the settlement here, Iberacum, meaning home of the Iberos, home of the yew trees. As time has gone on, Iberacum became Caer Ibroch, Iorwerk, Jorvik in Viking times, and York today.